Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. Things look a little different today. That's because this is our first broadcast from our new studio and set located in Murray, Utah. We are going to start our conversation on the new set with a show about human trafficking. Now, this is a problem that most people think is far away in strange lands, not close to home. But it is close to home, not only in urban Utah, but rural Utah as well. Our Attorney General has taken a very keen interest in this and made it a priority in his administration. So let's find out a little bit about it from Terry Wood.
Slavery is a dark chapter in America's past, but one that still echoes quietly today, reminding us of how far we've come as a nation and how far we still have to go. For most of us, the thought of slavery ends there in the past. But for thousands of people in the United States and millions around the world, slavery has taken on new forms. Today, human trafficking keeps alive what we've tried so long to bury.
Human trafficking is a global epidemic. I think the International Labor Organization pegs the number of modern-day slaves at somewhere over 21 million. The Global Slavery Index is higher, it's more than double that. They say there are over 46 million modern-day slaves. Human trafficking internationally is the fastest growing criminal enterprise.
Frank Urey, the director of Orange County Transportation, agrees. He's seen it firsthand in his Southern California jurisdiction.
It's a larger problem than so many people think, and there's a lot of good people working on it. The challenge is that there's so many of the bad guys. Pulling the different agencies together and getting the task forces and actually, introducing them to like a transportation authority to try to intercede on stuff like this. It's very sad, and unfortunately there's a lot of draw in Southern California, and candidly, that's one of the things I've learned over the last couple of years. It's a problem all over the nation.
Even here in Utah. Recently, law enforcement set up a sting using a common ad placement practice for human traffickers. And over a 3-day period, more than 70 arrests were made for participating in the transport and sale of women and children. The number was not surprising to officials. They say it only indicates the extent of the problem.
It is shocking probably to the average person, and I think many people would not realize the pervasiveness of some of these types of crimes. But for those of us in law enforcement who work in this area, those numbers aren't particularly high. On a federal level, there were thousands of people apprehended and arrested in conjunction with these operations.
As resources for law enforcement have expanded for prevention of human trafficking, so too have resources to help the victims. Programs are now available in Utah and across the country to help those trapped in this nightmare recover and find a life after enslavement. While these programs are a first step to counter the problem, officers stress that without the help of the public, all their efforts may be in vain.
One of the things that I always talk about is asking the public to help us be our eyes and ears out there, to not be afraid, to report to the authorities, to call the AG's office. We have a local hotline there on our website, and we have a national hotline for human trafficking, and we encourage everybody to take advantage and call.
It's been said that vigilance is the price of freedom. That is as true today as it was when it was first spoken, and it will likely take the attention and support of everyone if modern slavery is to be buried alongside its historic counterparts. For the County Seat, I'm Terry Wood.
Thanks, Terry, for that report. We will reconvene on our set with our guest panel with our discussion on human trafficking right after this commercial break on the County Seat.
When the road takes you farther than you knew possible, when the world is more beautiful than you've ever seen, when home is more comfortable than it should be, this is when you know you're in Kane County. The perfect mix of rural and urban, culture and adventure. Glendale, Orderville, Kanab, Bigwater, small towns with more to offer than just peace and quiet. Kane County, Utah. Find the new you.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our topic today is human trafficking. This is a problem that people just have not really grasped is existing in Utah. They think this is from faraway places and a lot of people even faraway lands, but it is real. Joining us for our conversation today is Daniel Strong, Assistant Attorney General. We have Tyler Cotter from the Utah Department of Public Safety, I should say Captain Cotter, and Jason Ackerman, who's a sergeant with Unified PD. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we got an idea that that the traffic is here, or that people are trafficking in Utah, but I still don't think we fully, in our story, were able to grasp how pervasive it is and how hard it is to identify. Do you think there are actually more cases than you are onto out there?
No. Absolutely. Yeah. You've heard about this more and more in recent years, human trafficking, and I think the main reason for that is that we heard about it and we started to look for it. And lo and behold, the more we looked, the more resources we put towards this problem, the more we find. So even the numbers that we're getting, you know, if you looked up arrests and prosecutions, I think would be much lower than the numbers that we would find if we had the resources to fully attack this problem, not just here, but nationwide. Because I think we find that we turn our lens to one kind of area of human trafficking, we start to find cases where we're looking. They're not the kinds of cases that are going to reveal themselves. They're the kind you really have to look for.
I think more of it's an education thing for law enforcement as well. I think as we become more aware of it and law enforcement becomes more aware of it, then you're apt to recognize it when you come across it and then take the appropriate steps to deal with it. And that's a challenge though, because it's very difficult to find criminals in their criminal element, what they're trying to do and trying to hide it. And it's a challenge for law enforcement. It's a challenge for the community, I think, to be aware of it as well. You know.
How much of your effort at a county level, because again, people don't see this as a problem in their neighborhood. If I were to say upper side of Cottonwood Heights, there's no human trafficking here, what would you say?
That's absolutely not true. It's what the captain is saying. It's widely believed that this isn't a problem, and the perception is off. It is everywhere. It's all socioeconomic levels. It's in all areas of this valley, and it's more prevalent than society and police officers are recognizing. And to your point, absolutely, there's a lack in education. We're often naive to the fact of what is going on here.
No, so Sergeant, when you say we're naive to that, are you talking just about us as the citizens that back law enforcement up, or is there a naivete within the departments too?
I would say both. There's been a lack of training for law enforcement, a lack of education for the public, and really that's where we're at right now, is trying to bridge that gap, and we're trying to catch up because we have fallen behind.
And I would say, as far as the community goes, we do have officers, and the Attorney General's office has a dedicated task force looking at human trafficking, and I know the departments around the state are doing that as well. But even with all those efforts, of the cases that I've filed this year, nearly all of them came first from a citizen tip. So someone who was smart enough to, or educated enough to look out for these signs and what's happening, call it in. We start an investigation, and we end up finding the evidence. We're not relying on a citizen to bring in the whole case, but it all starts with somebody out there saying this doesn't seem right and giving a call.
Okay, so I would think generally, if this started with Unified PD, the next place this would go would be to Sim Gill's office, the county attorney. How does the Attorney General of the state of Utah end up in this chain of command?
It's a good question. It's, the Attorney General's office focuses in on certain areas that are priorities for the state, and we have the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, the Secure Strike Force, which is where I work. They started out focusing on crimes involving undocumented residents. That led into human trafficking. So we're there as a resource for county prosecutors to help, and if the best way we can help is by taking on the case from the beginning, we'll do that, but we work in conjunction with the local agencies, and we're not trying to step on anyone's toes, just trying to help.
Well, I think this kind of gives us a good start to understand exactly what the scope of the problem is. The scope of the interrelation between the departments is probably where we'll pick up. You're watching The County Seat. We're talking about human trafficking today. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
All local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
Let's be honest, you don't know much about Beaver County. Well, let me tell you about it. It's the birthplace of outlaw Butch Cassidy and inventor Philo T. Farnsworth. Some of the best skiing in Utah is at Eagle Point. You've got camping, Canyon Breeze Golf Course, Crusher and the Tushers, Beaver Territorial Courthouse, snowmobiling, renewable energy, Pioneer Car Show, Squeaky Cheese, Ghost Towns to explore, best water in the country, Paiute ATV trails, Old Frisco Kilns, horse races, hunting, fishing, and it's a good place to live. Beaver County, mountains of fun. I could tell you more, but why don't you come and see it for yourself?
Welcome back to The County Seat. We are talking about human trafficking and problems within the boundaries of the state of Utah, both rural and urban, for our show today. I did want to try and understand the relationship and have people at home understand the relationship of our panel, because we have local law enforcement, we have state law enforcement, we have state ultimate law enforcement, or the legal beagles of this whole chain of command. How does the Utah Department of Public Safety fit into all this? What part of the puzzle do you guys fill?
Well, we play a couple of different roles. We have what's called the Utah Department of Public Safety has a statewide information and analysis center. It's kind of the fusion center. It's the intelligence center for the state. And part of their role in regards to human trafficking is doing an assessment throughout the whole state to figure out what the scope of the problem is. And they're in the midst of doing that right now. They have an analyst that's looking at different crimes throughout the state that are related to trafficking. And so that's one role that the state plays. It's a critical role, I think, as far as understanding trafficking. We also have agents that are assigned to task forces like with the Attorney General's office with Secure. And we also have a statewide footprint with the Utah Patrol, and then other agents with other responsibilities that cover the state. And so that's kind of our role in a nutshell.
To simplify it, he's Perry Mason and you're Paul Drake.
That's one way to put it, yeah.
Does the county rely on the Department of Public Safety a lot?
We do. We this type of issue doesn't know jurisdictions, and so communication amongst agencies is tremendous, and the state does a great job with bridging those gaps, and we can identify trends because it is such a fluid problem that, you know, usually the information that we receive is oftentimes old by the time we can get to it because they move so quickly.
Is transportation, you know, we talked about Transportation Commissioner in Southern California said public transit was one of his biggest problems in keeping an eye on it, and how their public transit system has become engaged in being part of the battle. Is that really one of the big problems, is that they're so nomadic?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Especially here in Salt Lake, it's unique because we have, you know, the I-15 and the I-80, and they do travel these circuits and these corridors, which gives them access to, you know, large cities, small cities. Mm-hmm. They travel these circuits. It's goes back to talking about that it's everywhere.
Does this end up being an interstate problem then?
Absolutely.
That you're engaged in?
Yeah, I'm a Salzer Special Assistant U.S. Attorney as well. So I work with the U.S. Attorney's Office on cases that are, you know, that reach their level of priority, I suppose, and those would typically be cases that involve interstate travel or very young children. And same deal if they get one that maybe doesn't fit with those parameters, they work with us to send it back. So it crosses all lines.
When we started the story, our conversation was that this was, you know, we thought slavery was gone, and slavery was not necessarily, you know, prostitution as a sort of human trafficking, but really, you know, a labor-related. Is sexual exploitation and human trafficking really the core of the problem?
No, it's much broader than that. It's much broader. And I want to emphasize, I think the word trafficking kind of starts us off almost on the wrong foot, because although transportation is often involved in these cases, it's not a necessary piece of them. So all the human trafficking means is essentially forcing someone to do labor or sex work against their will. And when I say forcing, that doesn't always just mean, you know, physical force or physical restraint. And I think that's also a common misconception. If you want to find these cases, it's not walking around looking for someone in handcuffs, because oftentimes the chains in modern day human trafficking are much more difficult to see. We have forms of coercion, you know, threats, economic factors, holding drugs over someone who's addicted to them. All these things can contribute to, if at the end of the day that person was not exercising their own free will to do the work, that they're working because someone made them, that's human trafficking. And with children, by the way, in sex crimes, we don't even need to show the force, because obviously children can't consent to those acts.
So how much of this problem is labor related? I mean, if you know, do you have any clue of well, you know, prostitution or sex issues are 30%. We've got 40% in forced labor. We've got 20%. Do you have any way of breaking that up at all? Do any three of you have a sense of that?
Well, I think that's why they're the SIAC, or the Statewide Information Analysis Center. That's why they're doing that assessment, is trying to figure out the scope of the problem. What percentage is related to sex trafficking? What percentage is related to labor? But it's not easy to really get those statistics, because, you know, part of it, the problem is how it's reported initially to law enforcement, how it's documented. And so there's some challenges there, but we're working on it, and it's something that we're focused on and willing to get after.
It's a great segue, Taylor, because the next question that the next question that I was going to ask is, how do we as citizens, what are we looking for if we want to help law enforcement out?
You know, Dan, you hit on a great point, as it's vulnerabilities. And there's so many different types of vulnerable victims, and that's what's being exploited, whether it be, you know, juveniles, whether it be, you know, drug abusers, children, the financial component, violence. We're looking for those things, and rarely do we ever get dispatched out to, you know, copy on a human trafficking case. It always comes across something different, because these victims, they're fearful, and we really have to peel back the layers to get to really the root cause of the problem, and not just the symptoms.
I think going back to what you asked the question is, what do we do as a communities? You know your communities in and out. You live there. You know what's normal. What should be happening, and we just encourage anyone, if there's something is suspicious, call your local law enforcement. say, this doesn't seem right, and say something, see something, say something. You know, it's something that if we don't say something, nothing's going to happen. But if we recognize it and say something to law enforcement, report it, it gives us a chance to hopefully potentially save someone from a bad situation.
An easy thing to say, but then, you know, person's reaction is, well, gee, my neighbor's kid always seems unhappy and I never see him out playing ball or anything like that. And then you go, I don't want to be the one to stir the muck up. And so, you know, where's that line? And should people feel bad for intruding in other people's lives? Because that's how a lot of people will see it in their own neighborhood, which is probably why they don't see it in their own neighborhood.
It does take a level of courage to come forward and do report it. As law enforcement, we would much rather be notified, and it's not a big deal, rather than something that we should have known about and we were never made aware.
Yeah, and again, it's not, you know, you call something in, you're probably not going to end up being the star witness in our case. You know, we'll take it from there. These guys know how to, like Sergeant Ackerman was saying, pull back the layers, and we're getting better at that. We're reaching out and trying to train officers so that they will be able to take even just a tip, something vague like you mentioned, and know how to look for trafficking as part of that.
Can you, in the last minute of this segment, can you actually just like give a few tips on what specifically somebody should be looking for? Some examples, any of you?
Sure. Well, the case I got a conviction on a couple months ago started with a motel owner who saw a lot of men coming and going from a room in the motel, 2 adult women who were in that room, another man who always appeared to be with the women, who kind of waited outside the room while something was going on in there, and he'd actually been trained by his corporate headquarters that might be trafficking. That's why he called it in. That's more of a sex trafficking fact pattern. Of course, there's all kinds of different things to look for, but it's one example where he just thought, why are these guys not coming to this motel who aren't staying here, and why do these women, you know, they not moving around freely? They're always with this other guy. It just didn't seem right to him.
Yeah, and even, you know, for law enforcement, you know, on a traffic stop, you've got 10 minutes. Maybe you got a vehicle stopped, you're looking at it, you're talking with the driver, you're trying to figure out what's wrong, and you got about 10 minutes to ascertain, is somebody at risk here? Is this juvenile in the car? Are they at risk? There's things we look for as far as indicators that might tip us off to some of those issues. So.
Excellent. You know, there's certain shows that I wish there'd be an hour for instead of a half hour. This seems to be one of them. We've got to take a break on the county seat. We'll be right back with our wrap up in just a minute.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
Shopping in Davis County has never been better. Experience Station Park, Northern Utah's premier gathering place for shopping, dining, and entertainment. With over 100 shops, Station Park is something for the whole family. Or explore the shopping possibilities this season under one roof at the Layton Hills Mall. Both are conveniently located north of downtown Salt Lake, just off I-15. Come take advantage of special discounts and a wide selection of stores. Visit playindavis.com for more info. Color, it's something that can be seen. But have you ever wanted to reach out and touch it? Experience it. In San Juan County, Utah, color comes to life like nowhere else on earth. Color can be more than an abstract. Color can be your gateway to a new world. Visit San Juan County and explore the past, present, and future in a way that you've only dreamed of. San Juan County. Color your experience.
Welcome back to the county seat. We've been talking about human trafficking in the state of Utah. It's been an informative half hour. I wish we could really go on for a little while longer, but we do have to wrap up. So, you know, a lot of people are going to be afraid to either, you know, say, hey, I'm caught, because they're not so much at going to the police, but the implications of the prosecution. How do you handle that fear? And I think I'll point that to you. You're the legal beagle.
Thank you. Well, I think we just need to drive the message home that we're here to help. In these cases, these guys can run surveillance all day long trying to build a case, but most of the time a human trafficking case is going to rely on testimony from a victim, from someone who's been through it. And so we really try to take a victim-centered approach. And you know, these people are often being forced to commit crimes like prostitution, drug dealing, other types of things. And so they might fear that we're not going to believe them, or that juries aren't going to believe them. And so that's a message I think we really want to convey, is that we do believe you, we know this is happening, we're there to help you, and we're going to take a victim-centered approach that puts the victim's well-being first, and that is going to lead us to finding more of these cases.
So if somebody is seeing something in their neighborhood and they're worried about it or concerned, or they observe something, is there some central place, a number they can write on the fridge, or a location?
Yeah, you know, initially, if they're confused anything up front, just call your local law enforcement. But there is a Utah Trafficking in Persons task force, and that's headed up by the Attorney General's office. And they have agents that work, that's what they do. So there is an opportunity to get a hold of your local law enforcement, or you know, get a hold of the tip line for UTIP, Utah Trafficking in Persons. Yeah.
UTIP, and so people can make an anonymous
Absolutely.
call there.
Yep, we can.
Anything else that we really need to get out here in this half hour?
I think the big thing is the perception, and oftentimes our perceptions are that, you know, these individuals are involved in it of their own free will, and that they choose to do this, and even to the point that it's enjoyable for them, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Oftentimes these are some of the saddest situations that you will ever come across, and truly desperate victims is really who we're trying to reach out to and trying to help. And that's what we need help with from the communities, from, you know, our politicians, from law enforcement, and better communication and a coordinated effort.
Absolutely.
So you've got a hotline. Call local. They can report anonymously. Kind of have some signs to look for. Is there any place they can go to get like a checklist of things they should be watching for?
Polaris is a group. You can just Google Polaris, like the North Star. They're a leading advocacy group in advocating for trafficking victims and combating human trafficking. They have a ton of information.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. Please share this show with your friends. It's available on YouTube. You can follow our social media on Facebook. We will see you next week on the County Seat. If you'd like to share this video with your friends, well, you do that right here. If you would like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you do that over here. If you'd like to interact with us on the County Seat, that happens over here. If you want to watch the next episode of the County Seat, you can catch it Saturday night at 11 or Sunday morning at 8:30 on ABC4 Good for Utah.